the Yud Zayin Amud Aleph by the Mishnah. Starts above Dvarim Pachur Machna. There are four things that an army is exempt from. Rashi tells us, talking about people that go to war. We'll see it's talking about Milchemes Rishus, as we'll see in the Gemara. What are the four things? Maybe in Eitzim, they can collect wood from anywhere. They need fuel, whatever it is, for heat or cooking. They can take wood from wherever, even though it's stealing. They're at war. So they can collect that wood. And they don't have to wash their hands. The Gemara will tell us which hand washing they're referring to. Midmai. Midmai is produce that's acquired from an amaretz. We don't know if he took meiser. Now, since we assume that they did take meiser, this is just a chumrah with the rabbanan. So if someone's at war, he's exempt from that, and he's allowed to eat it without taking meiser. And milah, he doesn't have to make an eruv. That would mean if there's two areas that are surrounded by the fences that we learned how to make, either with sticks or ropes or however they made the fence. So if there are two of them that are attached, they don't need an Eiruvin to be able to carry from one to the other. See if it means Eiruvin from also. Ketana Rabbanan was taught in a Brayse Machna Yitzlam Milchemes Rishus in term because late innovation. An army that's going out to Milchemes Rishus means a voluntary war, as opposed to the wars of Yeshua, which were Milchemes Mitzvah, they were conquering the land of Israel. This is not the command to conquer the land of Israel. It's just the going to a war, whatever it is. So it says they're allowed to take from wood, dried wood that's stolen. Rav Yehuda ben Taimar Afeinin b'chol makom, b'makom shenergu sham nikbarim. They can encamp anywhere they want, and if someone gets killed, he's buried right there. I'm just going to explain this price now. First thing is Mutarim begezel yevation. Begezelating yevation. They're allowed to take stolen dried wood. Mar says this has to do with the battle. This has to do with the battle. It says Haitakanta the Yeshua have it. You see, when they came into the land of Israel, there were certain institutions that the Yeshua set up. Sort of like what we would say here would say, the founding fathers, set up this program and that program. So when they came into the land of Israel, so Yeshua set up certain things that how it should run. One of the things is the Amar Mar, says Asara Tanam Hisni Yeshua. There were 10 things that Yeshua instituted when he came to the land, and one of them was Shiu Marim Becharshin Malak Mitzim Sadisayim. They could take their animals to go graze in someone's forest. That wasn't the problem. Someone had a bunch of trees, whatever, bushes. They could take the animals to graze there, and also they could collect wood from their fields. Just take other people's wood. What are you telling me that this is mutter if you're at battle? You're always allowed to do this. He says no. It's not really you're allowed to take their wood. There, you're allowed to take their bushes, like the dried bushes, the little pieces of that the animals can chew on. That you're allowed to take. Here, by war, we're talking about wood. I'm not talking about the bushes. You're allowed to take the wood. Now, inami, there's another pshat. There's a difference if it's still on the bush or if it was removed from the bush. If it was removed from the bush, so then obviously the owner put some effort into this to collect these twigs. And by war, you're allowed to take that. Regularly, you're not allowed to take it. The owner collected it, you're not allowed to take it. Inami, another pshat, hasan balachem achbiyavation. If it's still moist, then you're not allowed to take it. But by battle, you're allowed to. But if it's still moist, then you're allowed to take it. But if it's dried out, that means the owner had to wait for it to dry to be able to use it for fuel. So then that effort that he put in and the time that he waited makes it also for you to take. But by battle, you're allowed to take it. Okay, that's what resolved this contradiction here. They're allowed to encamp anywhere. And if someone gets killed, he gets buried right there. The Gemara says, Pshita, of course he gets buried right there. Meis mitzvah, died in battle, is a meis mitzvah. The rule is, meis mitzvah kind of mekaymai. A meis mitzvah is someone that dies without any relatives around for him to be able to get buried. The rule is, a meis mitzvah is kind of mekaymai. He acquires the land that he died on, and he gets buried right under that. Gemara says like tzricha. We have a chiddush here. We should really read this. No, tzricha. It's necessary. There is a chiddush here. Zafagav. This like kavim. Here we're talking about that he has people to bury him. It's not a real meis mitzvah. The Tanya is meis mitzvah kol shein like kavim. What's a meis mitzvah? Anyone that doesn't have people to bury him. Let's say, I guess the people around there call, and people are coming to help out. It's a meis mitzvah. This is not a meis mitzvah. So nevertheless, this fellow that died in battle, even though maybe he has relatives there that could take him wherever his other area that he could go to, nevertheless, he gets buried there. Meis mitzvah kind of mekaymai. Is it true that a meis mitzvah gets buried always in the spot that he died? Tanya, but we have a brisa. Someone finds a corpse that's laying on the highway. You see, we want them to be buried off the road because Kayanim are going to travel. They'll become tummy. Will be setting up a situation which would be very difficult for Kayanim. So you move them either to the right off the road or to the left. Stay bor stay near. Let's say there's two fields on the side of the road. One is a field that's plowed, and one is a field that's fallow, that's just left there empty. So mefanel stay bar, you put them in the field that's fallow, that hasn't been plowed yet. Stay never stays there. Let's say one of them was plowed. One of them was not only plowed, but they even sowed the grain in it. So more work went into that. Mefanel stay near. You put them in the one that was plowed, not the one that has the grain growing. Let's say they were on both sides of the highway. They were the same. Either they were not plowed, or they were plowed, or they were both sowed. Whatever it is, they're the same. So this is like flip a coin, right? So you go to any side you want. Okay, this is a question. Because here we were just taught that you move the meis mitzvah, and he's not kind of mekayim. Where it says, Rabibi responds, here we're talking about a corpse that's laying on the border. Now, the border means that it's going across the border. It means it's going across the road. Because you want to take him across from the way, you want to remove him from blocking the road. So then you can move him to anywhere you want. So normally, if the corpse is on a place where it does not need to be moved, he's buried right there. If he doesn't need to be moved, then you have those options. Someone that's a battle doesn't need to wash his hands. Amar Abaya said, that's only to wash his hands first. But wash your hands after the meal. That's chova. Right? It's an obligation. Even in battle, you have to wash your hands after the meal. There's a story, I forget, with a certain person who went to battle. Before he went, he asked one of the rebbes, for a bracha, this Rebbe told him you should always be makbid on Netilas Yadayim. Which doesn't fit with our Gemara. He said you should always be makbid on Netilas Yadayim. And one time he went to get water, and when he came back, he saw that the bomb had fallen where his place was. So, okay, whatever the case, maybe he went to get my machrin. So, Amar Rav Chia Barashi, why? Why is it an obligation? See, Mayim Rishonim is Tumin Tara. And if he's a Kayan, and he's eating Truma, you have to wash your hands before you eat Truma. We wash our hands in commemoration of that. So it's all for things that are bread, or, for those things that could be Truma, grain. So, why? What about my machrenim? Why is it an obligation? Well, there's this Sodom salt that's in there that could make the eyes blind. Very interesting Tosfos here. Tosfos on the top says now we're not so makbid in Mayim Achreinim because we don't have melech sedonis, or we don't put our fingers in the salt after we eat. Isn't that interesting? We can't paskin from this Tosfos, but because in Shulchan Aruch it says to wash Mayim Achreinim. That's an interesting point. So Amar Abaya says Mishtach Kekurta Bekura. There's a little bit of melech sedomis in a large amount of salt. It's really mixed in the salt. It's not that you use directly melech sedomis. They used salt. And in the salt, there was also this type of salt that was mixed in, some mineral or whatever. Let's say someone measures out salt for something else. You're just measuring salt. It's not at the meal or whatever. So Malay, that's not a question. No, that's for sure you have to. I read it first, that it wasn't necessary. And then I see that the Mepharshim don't write it like that. Means that's not a question. The word mibai means need, necessary, or ask. So that's not a question. It means you definitely do. I think Rashi's Gershel was Kolshki. Actually, a different Gershel. And you also don't have to take meiser from the produce that you acquire from an amar. It's people at battle. The Tanan, we started in the Mishnah, Machil Masaniyim Demai. There's exceptions for Demai. In other words, you don't know if meiser was taken, but it could be meiser was. So how strict do you have to be about this doubt? So you try to be strict, but there are certain cases where you don't have to be strict about it. It's a doubt anyway. You're allowed to feed it to someone that's poor. You're allowed to give him demai. He doesn't have what to eat. So this is a question, but nevertheless he's allowed to eat this. And the same as with achsanya, if you're feeding an army. Apparently the army would come to town. You would have to give them produce to eat. You're allowed to give them demai. Dr. Stein, what is that referring to?
It's just the word demai. I couldn't get a picture.
I thought it was some label on something. Okay, so Tosfos over here says, what are we talking about when we talk about an army? We talk about an army. Talking about a Jewish army or a non-Jewish army? Tosfos says we're talking about a Jewish army. You're allowed to give them demai. Says, however, it's not necessarily so, because let's say it would be a non-Jewish army. Would you be allowed to give produce that meiser wasn't taken from to a non-Jew? Is that allowed? I mean, the Jew is not, if it would be a Jew, he wouldn't be allowed to eat it. But are you allowed to use non-tithed produce for anything else? Is it mutar ba'ana? It says it's not mutar ba'ana. It's asur ba'ana. So even if it's non-Jews, the same thing would apply. You wouldn't be allowed to give it if it was a real issue. It's not a real issue, so therefore you're allowed to give it. Amar Rav Huna. Rav Huna says, Tana was taught in the Brisa, B'shami Emrei Mechilam Esaniyim Demai V'Sachsaniyim Demai. B'shami holds you're not allowed to feed Demai, this questionable produce, to poor or to the army. Beisul Leimer Machilim Asanim Demai Vasachsani Demai Beisul holds you are allowed to. Umila Arev, you don't have to make an Eruv if you're at battle. Amri de Rabbi Yanai was taught in the house of Rabbi Yanai. Early Amira in Eretz Yisrael. When do you say you don't have to make an Eruv? That's only a Eruv Chatzeres, but the Eruv Tchumen Chayavin. But if they need to walk to a certain area, then and they have to 2,000 amas out of the camp or whatever, they have to set up Eruv Tchumen. They're not exempt from Eruv Tchumen. They're only exempt from Eruv Chatzeres. Eruv Tchumen extends your residence 2,000 amas away from where you are, up to 2,000 amas, and then you get another 2,000 amas. Eruv Chatzeres just means that you're allowed to carry from your backyard to your friend's backyard. So Eruv Chatzeres they're exempt from, because it's all Rosh Hashanah. Happens to be, it's his Rosh Hashanah. That's a rabbinic, but the Eruv Tchumen is a biblical law. It's machlokes probably in Yerushalmi, but it's machlokes in halacha as well. The Rambam, the Tani Reb Chia, because Reb Chia taught Leiken al Eruv Tchumen Dvar Torah that you get malchus for Eruv Tchumen. So therefore, you're not exempt from that just because you're at battle. Now, if it's a life and death situation, it's a different story. We're not discussing that. We're talking about just people are at battle doesn't mean that every minute they're fighting. That battle could take who knows how long. They lay siege to a city, they could be there for months. And so what are they doing while they're waiting? Are they exempt from this just because they happen to be there? So Maskefler Rabbi Yonason B'chileiken Alav Shabal. 1 second. When it says Eruv Tchumen, it says Al Yetze Yesh Memkayim. A man should not go out from his area. It says Al. It doesn't say Lo Yetze. It says Al. So if it says Al, do you get malchus for an Al? You get malchus for a Lo. 1 second. The Gemara says Maskefler Rabach Bayakov. What is that really a distinction? If that's the case, what you just made up, that there's a distinction between Al and Lo, both means don't. Do not. So the Ksev al Tifno el Oivis Vela Yedainim, do not turn to the Oiv. It's a type of witchcraft. Or Yedaini, there's also another type of witchcraft. How would they work? They would talk to the dead, they would put a bone in their mouth, or they would put something under their arm. There are different types of witchcraft. And
isn't it Al Tifno Lilim also something like that?
Yeah,
it's a number of times Al is light.
Ah, very good. So the Gemara says, so you don't get malchus for any of those things. So it's hachanami lucky. You don't get malchus for that just because it says Al. So it says no. Rabbi Yonason Kashale, you do get malchus for the Al. That wasn't his question. You didn't understand this question. His question was Lavshin Lazarus Mises Bezdin. You don't get malchus if that rule has a more serious punishment, if it has a capital punishment attached to it. So here, carrying on Shabbos, if I learn that you're not allowed to carry from one domain to another domain on Shabbos, from the verse, Al Yetze Yishmim Kaimai, that a person should not go out from his camp carrying, if that's where I learn carrying from, well, carrying on Shabbos gets is capital punishment. It's one of the prohibitions, one of the 39 malachos. So violation of Shabbos is capital punishment. So if that's the source for carrying, and that pasuk also teaches me that I'm not allowed to leave the tchum, then this verse is really associated with capital punishment. Then there should be no malchus for this verse, even if it's not that original law. But this verse has capital punishment. Lav shenit lazaris mises bezdin, a negative prohibition that's associated with capital punishment. Chalav shenit lazaris mises bezdin, ain't like love. You don't get malchus. So why should you get malchus for the tchumen? Tchumen is the same verse that says don't carry. Now tchumen is leaving the area, the residence, going 2,000 amas, but it doesn't have to do with carrying. It has to do with just walking. You just can't leave it. We're now saying that pasuk also contains don't carry, which is mises bezdin, which is capital punishment. Amar Ravashi says no. Miksev al Yaitzi doesn't say do not take out. Al Yaitzi it says do not go out. Which means that the law of carrying on Shabbos is not associated with this pasuk of Al Yaitzi Yishman Kaimi, a person should not leave his place. So therefore, this pasuk tells me that you get malchus. And what about the pasuk? What about the law of carrying? That's one of the 39. I don't need a pasuk for that. It says that it's associated with that. That's maybe an asmachta or something, but that's not the real the meaning of that pasuk. It's like the second parak. So it's easy for us because we already had this concept mentioned a bunch of times that normally a wall is supposed to be majority filled in, majority wall and not majority holes. Which one is it? What's the more significant? Should it be? Notice if it's half and half. We said that was a machlekes Rav Papa and Rav Huna Breder of Yeshua. We paskined, it seemed like from the Gemara that half and half is kosher. There's an exception to this, and that is Eisen Pasan Lebirais. If there's a well, you need to get water out from the well to be able to feed the animals. The well itself is Rosh Hashanah. The area outside the well, why is it Rosh Hashanah? Because it's 10 tvachim deep. The area outside the well is Rosh Hashanah. You can't transfer the water from the well to the public area. So how are you going to do that on Shabbos? People would travel to Eretz Yisrael, to Yerushalayim. They would need water for the animals. So what they would do is they would set up the yumdin. They would set up these arba diyumdin. The word diyu in English, I guess it comes from Latin or Greek, is means two. So diyumdin means two walls, means a corner, two posts. Nira kishmaina, there's four diyumdin, it means four double posts, which appear to be a divrei Yehuda. That's what you do. So the picture, we got this right here. It's like this. Here, that's a double, here's the well. That's the double post. This is one diyumid. The Mishnah calls it a diyumid or it calls it pasim. Diyu, Aimid is a well. So
is
it's
that
a double.
what we called it last time? This is not the first time we've seen.
Yeah, we've had this before. We've had this before, but here's the Mishnah. Before we were just quoting this Mishnah. Mm-hmm. So, you have four of these double walls, which is now 8, because each one is 2. We're going to learn what's the area that could be between them. It's either 10 amos or 13, a 13 and a third. And we're going to learn how distant these walls could be from the well. We'll learn how far away they are from the well. If you do make it further away, then you have to add pasin in between because they can't be too much empty space. That's what we'll learn in this Mishnah. So, Rav Meir says that there's 8, yes, but it appears to be 12. How do you have that? So he explains, Arba Diyumdim, Arba Pshutim. The picture that Dr. Stein has in his background is that there's 4 posts on the corners, which means 8, because each one is a corner, so that means there's 2.
On the page before, on 39, it has that. On the British
39. In this sefer that we're using?
Yeah, the first page, Parak Sheni, on page 39.
Okay. Yeah, what would we do without you?
You're the one who got me the sefer or told me about it.
Here, beautiful. So here you have the 4 posts. Plus you have 4 extra posts in between because the space is too wide. So that means 12. Because first 4 is 8 because each one is 2. So 8 plus 4 is 12. Okay. How tall are the posts? It says Goiven Asar Tvachim. 10 Tvachim. Easy. Vareich van Shisha. How wide are they? They're 6 tvachim. 6 tvachim is an amma wide. But even kolshu, but they don't have to be thick. They could be very thin panels. Very thin panels. 10 tvachim by an amma by a centimeter or smaller. Okay. Ubineim kamalei shtei revakis shell shalish bakar. Between the posts, how distant they are from one another. The Gemara will explain the size of this. But we start off saying that it's 10 amas. How do you get to the 10 amas? Because you have 2 groups of 3 cattle. Each one is an amma and a third. So you have 6. 6 cattle. So I'm in a third and I'm in 2/3. Let's wait for the Gemara.
Can I ask a question quick? Is an amma here considered only at 6 tvachim, not at 5?
Here we're using 6 tvachim.
Okay.
Here we're using 6 tvachim. Yeah, Barach von Shisha means that it's an amma. So the first opinion of Reb Meir is that you have to be able to have 3 cattle, a pair of 3 cattle entering, 3 cattle exiting, and we'll see some more details soon. But the Reb Meir Shita is that it's 10 amas. Rabbi Yehuda says that it's a group of not 3 cattle entering, 3 exiting. It's a group of 4 entering, 4 exiting. Kshuris v'lei mutaris says that they are tied together, which makes them tighter. So even though he's increasing the size to 4, it's decreased to being tied closer together. And achas nichnas v'achas. It says one is entering, one is exiting, which actually increases the size, because if they're both going the same way, they could get closer. When they're going opposite directions, it's a little further apart. Okay, mutal hakrev lebe'er. You could get very close to the well. You don't have to keep them spread out so far, these corners. It could be closer. As long as you have the head and the majority of the animal inside. That means you can't do it too close to the well, because then we have a concern that the water is going to end up going out from this marked off area, and then you'll be carrying. So it has to be able to be functioning as that the animal could get over to the well, to right outside the well to be able to drink. Mutar laharchek kol shehu. You can make it farther apart. We're now on top of Yudches, as much as you want. As long as you make it larger, you add stalks, slats to extend it, as we saw in the picture behind Dr. Stein also.
Says that we're afraid that the actual walls, the dividers, will actually come down. The oxen will smack it down because there's not enough space, and you're going to fix it on Shabbos. That's why you need a specific amount of space. It just mentions here in the notes.
I didn't know that. I thought that when it's giving us the measurement of how far apart they could be, I thought that they can definitely be closer.
It's based on the need to allow them to move freely. One goes in, one goes out, and if the space is too tight, the oxen are going to knock down the middle board, and you're going to fix it on
That's
top.
a chiddush to me. My understanding of this whole thing was that you're allowed to spread it out up to that limit, but if you want to make it smaller, that would definitely be allowed.
It doesn't seem from the note here. It doesn't seem to go by that.
Rabbi?
Yeah.
Question on what Abi said, but we learned earlier that you can actually make part of the wall by putting the animals there, as long as they were there.
If they were
so
tied.
it seemed,
Yeah.
Aye,
Just tied.
so who cares if the wall falls off? If they're tied there and they're right
Yeah,
there,
but
so
here
the
we're
wall
not talking about animals tied there. Here we're talking about setting it up for a way, possibility for the animals to come in and drink on Shabbos.
Oh,
I'll be
the
saying that it needs
potential.
to be a certain distance from each other to allow the animals to get in. I thought that the chiddush is that it's allowed to be a part. You hardly have a wall there. If you're going to increase the wall, then it's not a chiddush. You want to have a full wall. You want to have a house. That for sure it's going to work.
It's a leniency only for this case with animals.
Only a leniency.
This doesn't apply to everything.
Right. It's a special leniency that you can have. Mamish, no wall. You have just corners, and it's already going to work. That's how I was learning it. Okay. Rabbi Yehuda Aimer, ad basis side. Maybe it says there's a limit to how big you can make this, even though you want to add pasin, which are slats, going along to increase the size. It shouldn't be more than 10 amas or 13 amas. But you do have a limit. You can't make it larger than a basis sayim. Basis sayim is 100 by 50 amas, or 75 by 75. Amrloi. They responded to Rabbi Yehuda. They said, that's for a garden or for a karfif, is a large area which is not made for living in. It'd be like a place where they stored wood. It's called like a park or something. Just a large area that doesn't have any houses there. That's where we said that you can't mark off that area if it's larger than a base of Sayim, 100 by 50. But if it's a place, a pen, for animals to go in. And they would do this because they would want to fertilize the fields. So they would keep the animals on different spots in the field, and they would make this movable pen to keep them in, and then that would fertilize the fields. And then move it over to the next field. And as they would move it, they would fertilize it. Or if it's another type of pen for animals that are in the city, a muktzah, this is like a backyard, a chutzner, or there's a front yard. I feel a base chamisha kurin. If it's even 5 kur, you see, a base of sayim is 2 sa. A kur is 30 sa. We're saying even if you're able to plant in this area 5 kur, so it's 175 times the size, 150 sa, 75 times the size. Feel base asara kur and mutter. Even if it's 10 kur, you're allowed to mark off an area that people are living in, do a city, right? Mutter laharchik. Takes this out. Mutter kavachi the side takes that out. Okay. So what the Chachamim are telling Rabbi Yehuda is don't get carried away with that limit about base asayim. That's not talking about pasin, which is water for animals. That limit of Beis Asayim is a limitation that's put on a place where it's not a dwelling area. But Rashi says, the way Rashi explains this Gemara is that since the water could also be used for human consumption, so therefore this is considered a dwelling area, and it could be much larger than a Beis Asayim. All the Mefarshim ask on Rashi, why does he have to say that it has to do with the water's fit for human consumption? It's fit for animal consumption, and that should be enough based on everything that we're learning. If it's a place for animals, then it's good. Then that's considered a bistira. That's a kasha in Rashi. The Gemara says we're going to have several attempts here to say that our Mishnah doesn't go like a certain Tana. The Gemara is going to say not necessarily is that the pshat of the Mishnah. Let's say our Mishnah is not like Chananya. The Tanya is impossible to bar v'chavalin shiara. Over here we have a brisa that says when it comes to a well, you can make pasim, which means corners, these corner walls for a well. What do you do for a camp? If there's like an army or a caravan or something, how do you enclose that? You can't just make pasim. Over there we said you put sticks in the corners and you wrap ropes around every 3 tefachim, raised up 3 tefachim, 3 tefachim, 3 tefachim. You wrap a rope around. That's how you mark that up. That's based on our Mishnah and the Mishnah before. Chananya says you always need ropes. This business with corners is not acceptable. Our Mishnah clearly argues with Chananya. When he answers, it says, "Afilu tema Chananya." It actually could be Chananya. Bar l'chud, be'er l'chud. You have to be precise in your translation here. Pasen lebirois is wells, not cisterns or water containers. A bar is a place where you collect water. A be'er is a well, where a spring, where the water comes out, or the water comes from underground, not that you collect the rainwater in. So, which would mean like this, that Chananya says that for a well, you cannot use pasim. Why? Because it's a special heter to get water. And I don't know if the well was empty. A cistern, I'm sorry, I should use a cistern, is a collection of water, a collection of rainwater. I don't know if the cistern is empty. But when it comes to a well, it's coming from underground, it's not empty. So that, Chananya would be mater, so he would hold like our Mishnah. Interesting teretz. Some learn it differently. Some say that Chananya could have said that he made a contrast. He said, you don't make pasim, you don't make corners. You're only allowed to use ropes to wrap around whether it's for a caravan encampment or if it's for a well or a bar. Okay. So if he wanted to tell me two things that you have to make ropes around, then he could have said, if he wanted to give me a contrast of when you're allowed to use pasim, then he would have said, he could have said this. If there is a difference between a cistern and a well, he could have said that. Michlal, the fact that he didn't say it, he didn't say that. That's a raya that you're not allowed to use pasim, even for a well. Where it says, okay. That's how we would finish off, and we don't have an answer to that. The first way of learning this was that we had an answer that there's a difference. Ikad Amri, that if there was a difference, Chananya would have told it us. So if that's the case, then our Mishnah doesn't fit with Chananya, according to this. Where it says, Afilu tema Chananya, it really could be Chananya, even according to the second way. The Tanakama never said anything about a well. The Tanakama was mater, even a cistern. So Chananya is responding. He's saying that you can't use chavala, you can't use pasim for a cistern. Well, no one mentioned that. You can't ask me, why didn't Chananya say you're allowed? No one mentioned that, it wasn't discussing it. So it could be that our Mishnah, which is talking about a well or a spring, but there Chananya would allow it, and our Mishnah could fit with Chananya. Next question of who is our Mishnah going according to? Let's say our Mishnah doesn't fit with Rabbi Akiva. Mishnah says that whether it's a well for the public or a cistern for the public, or a well for an individual, he leaves out a cistern for an individual. For those you can make pasim, you can make corners. But if it's a well if it's a cistern for an individual, then you need actual walls. So that's not going to work. Divri Rabbi Akiva, that's Rabbi Akiva's opinion. Now, what does our Mishnah say? Lebirois in the Barislai. But we only have wells. We don't have cisterns in our Mishnah. Rabbi Akiva was mater a cistern for the public, a public cistern that you can use birayis. You can use pasin, those corners. Our Mishnah didn't allow that. At least it didn't tell it us. It only says a well or a spring. When it says Afilu Tamer Rabbi Akiva, you see, but now we're going the other way. Akiva was more lenient than the Mishnah. But really, the Mishnah could even go according to Rabbi Akiva. Why did it say Be'er? Be'er, Mayim Chaim de Psikalei. It only spoke about a Be'er because Leishna de Rabban Leishna de Yachid Ketani. It doesn't matter if it's a public one or a private one. If it's a well, it's always mutter. But bar, that's mechunasim. That's a collection of water. It's a cistern. Leipzikale, that it's not so clear. It depends. Is it a public one? Is it a private one? So like Tani, our Mishnah didn't get into that. Our Mishnah wanted to tell us things that it doesn't need to get into, the details. So it only spoke about the well, a cistern. There are times that a cistern is mutter as well. And the Mishnah would agree with Rabbi Akiva. It just didn't get into those details because then you have to start saying sometimes yes, sometimes no. There's a third attempt to say that our Mishnah doesn't follow the following Tana, Rabbi ben Bava. So he was the one that gave smicha to those 5 people. He was one of the Asara Rugi Malchus. Was killed by the spears. They threw arrows or spears in him. The Tanan was taught in the Mishnah, Rabbi ben Bava Aimer, Einais in Pasan el Lebera Rabban Bilvad. You can only make pasim, these corners, for a be'er harabim, for a well of the public. But here we have a plural for wells. That would mean any well. Now Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava would be more strict than our Mishnah. When it says Afilu Tem Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava, it could really be Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava as well. My birais. What does it mean birais? Which you understood to mean whether it's a public well or a private well. Doesn't mean that. Birais means birais to alma. The fact that it said wells with a plural, birais, same S at the end, English and the Hebrew. Birais. So that plural is not referring to public or private. No, it's referring to all the wells, birais to alma. We had this recently, that there's a concept of saying a plural, not because you're actually talking about 1 and 2. You're talking about in general. And then when you're talking in general, so you make it into a plural. My diyumtin. What is the meaning of the word diyumtin? 2 walls. The word amud, which means a stand, the Gemara uses to mean a wall. The Mishnah sometimes calls it pas or aimed. That's it means we use the term amud aimed meruba ala paratz or parts meruba ala aimed. It means a standing wall. Okay. Now we have a siman for all the statements that are going to be from Rabbi Yirmiyah ben Elazar. Siman for all the statements that are going to be from Rabbi Yirmiyah ben. So it says Diay lemenuda shvach zingus niskalkel b'mida shleisha siman. Okay, so that's the siman we'll go through. We don't have them all one after another. We have to learn the whole Gemara to see all of them. It starts off. We just did the first one, which is the Diay, which means 2. Tanan Nasimu is taught over there. Rabbi Yehuda Aimer, Kol Hashitin. There's all types of figs, Turin. They're exempt from taking meiser if they're demai. Demai we had earlier today is that we're not sure if meiser was taken, if the tithe was removed, because this was belonged to an amaretz, which we don't know if he really takes meiser. The only thing is this is such inferior quality that for him it doesn't matter. He would take the meiser. He probably took meiser off it anyway. Chutz mina diufra, except for diufra. It's a special fig that these you have to take meiser because maybe the amaretz was more stingy here, and he didn't take the meiser of it. My diyafra, what a diyafra? Amarula ila naisa diyoi peres b'shana. This is a tree that gives 2 seasons a year. Two
Two for
fruits.
one, BOGO. 2 for 1, BOGO. Buy one, get one free. 2 for 1.
Right. So you have a tree like this, you get the double amount. But that wasn't the point. The point was that these are a better quality. Amar Rabbi Eiruvin ben Elazar. Rabbi Eiruvin ben Elazar says, "Diyoi parts of panim hayolay l'adam rishon." Adam Rishon had 2 faces, one on the front, one on the back. Shneimar acha b'kedem tartani. We have a pasuk in Tehillim which says that God created me, He formed me back and front. Ksiv, it says in the pasuk, "Vayivan Hashem elikim es hatzela," that Hashem built the side. It's usually translated as a rib, but that's probably not the Jewish translation. Here it's translated as a side. God took the side off Adam Rishon and He made Chava. What side? The back, because He had on the face, He had the front, He had a, well, we don't know which one is the front, which one's the back, but one side was male, one side was female. We'll see in the Gemara soon. And He took off one side. That means He had Chava on the other side. Rabbi Shmuel, so Machlokes Rabbi Shmuel, Chadam are parts of. One says, what side? What is it when it says side? One says it's another face. Chadam Razana, one says that Adam Rishon had a tail. And he moved the tail. It works out well according to the opinion that said Adam had another face on the back. That's it says, you formed me, front and back. But if it's a tail, you formed me on the back. What's the tail? It doesn't a form. It's just an extra piece of skin, a bone. Gemara says, goes according to Rabami. That pasuk is translated differently. Man was created last in creation. Everything else was created day 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And then man was created, so he's created last. But however, he's first for punishment. Let's see how that works out. We get the first part, that Adam was created last. We get the last part, that Adam Rishon was created last. Right? Every Admali Shabbat was only created on Erev Shabbos. What do you mean he's punished first? If you want to say because of the curse after he ate from the tree of knowledge. The snake was cursed first. And then afterwards, Chava was cursed. And then Adam was cursed. So it can't be that Adam is punished first because of that sin. El Mabel is talking about the flood of Noach. Over there it says, that all the growth, all the standing things that were on the ground were destroyed. From man to animal. So man was first. Man got punished first. What are we doing here? We're saying that Adam could be that the tzela, the side that was removed, was the tail. Well, how do we translate the pasuk? That you made me front and back. That means that you made me first. You made me last. You created me last, but you punished me first. That's by the flood. And now we'll have to see how other things fit in. But it's possible for that opinion to work. Parts of.
Rabbi, this is a new variation of the Machshava Techila. It's kind of backwards.
We'll see more about Machshava in a minute.
Well.
Parts of, according to the opinion that says that it was another face. That's why it says in the pasuk, it says Vayitzer with an extra yud. That means that there were 2, that extra yud is alluding to the 2 forms that he had, a face in the front, a face in the back. But if there was just a tail, my Vayitzer, is that really another form? Reb Shimon ben Pazi. Gemara explains, this is going according to Reb Shimon ben Pazi. The extra yud is not referring to the 2 forms. It's referring to the two words Yetzer and Yotzer. says, whatever I do, I can't satisfy everyone. If I satisfy God, then my Yetzer Hara. If I satisfy my Yetzer Hara, I say, my God. So you can never please everyone. So that's the two Yuds over there. Bishlam and Lamandam are parts of it. Works out well according to the opinion that says that Adam is an extra face and it's Zachar and Nekeva Barim. It says that God created them male and female. One was a male, one face was a male, one face was a female. Lamandam are son of my Zachar and Nekeva Barim. But if he was just had an extra tail, what does it mean he created them male and female? When it says look at the Rabbavo, look at the Rabbavo. The Rabbavo Rami. Rabbavo asked a contradiction between the verses. Ksiv Zachar Nekeva Baram. It says that he created them male and female. Ksiv Kibitzelam Al Kim Bara Isai, that he created him, singular, in the image of God. How does it work? Betchila also b'machshava livreis shnayim. He originally intended to create two. But in the end he only created one. Then afterwards he had to, out of that one, he made the wife, he made Chava. What we just gained here was that we're using now machshava to be Zachar Nekeva Bara. He intended to create them together, but he actually only created one. And then from that one, from the tail, he formed Chava. Krishna and Lamandam are parts of, that's according to one opinion. Now, according to the opinion that says that there was parts of, there was another face. That means that he had to seal off one side, the flesh, the whole back had to be sealed off. What's it called? Dr. Stein, they use that electric.
Cauterize?
Cauterize.
Quarterize.
Shem had to cauterize the back of Adam because he took off.
Plagiarize.
So, if he took off the tail, what does it mean? He had to close off.
May I just put in something?
Yeah.
Hello? Okay, so my dad just said plagiarize. Dad, it's Ben. Dad, I know I'm in a big class. Okay, but speaking of Chava, this, I got framed for plagiarizing, and somebody else did it, and I did. Okay. Sorry, bye. I'm out. Sorry, Dad.
Okay. So what does it mean that he closed off this? So just a small tail there. Amar of Zvid, Vitem Rabbi Yirmiyah, Vitem Rabbi Nachman Bar Yitzchak, Yitzchak L'Makom Chetach. Yeah, that one spot where they cut it off had to be cauterized. Now we go the other way. Works so well according to the opinion that says it's a tail that Ksivayiven. So he had to build. Out of a tail to make a whole human. That's to build. He built. Almandam are parts of, might be even, but if it's just another face, so you cut off the back, it was already built. Gemara says, Reb Shimon ben Menashe, no, it goes according to Reb Shimon ben Menashe, the Darash, Reb Shimon ben Menashe, V'yiven Hashem Elokim Esatzela. So Hashem built the side. What does it mean? Built doesn't mean built. Built means braid. He braided her hair. Because in the islands they call braiding, they call it benaisa. You have to look up and search that on Google Translate. See which.
By the way, this whole Gemara we've learned before.
Yeah. Where do we have it? We had it in Brachas probably.
I'm looking at it and saying, I know, I'm not that smart, but I
another pshat, even Hashem Elikim. They said one time they changed the bookmark in the Gemara to a page before, and then they started learning. 20 minutes into the shir, someone says, "I remember this from 7 years ago." It's really the yesterday's. No, this was a few months ago, 6 months ago, 7 months ago. Vayiven Hashem Elikim. Hashem built Amar Rav Chisda v'Amar Masisatan Ram Shabana Kadosh Baruch Hu Chava K'Binyan. He built Chava like a building, a binyan oitzer, like a storage building. Ma oitzer zerachav milmata v'katzim milmayla. Just like a storage house, you have to build it wider on the bottom, like a granary. You build it wider on the bottom, it gets narrow on top. You can't build it the other way, wide on the top and narrow on the bottom, because it will fall over. So To be able to contain the fruit. Wider at the waist, and then she gets narrow as up. To be able to hold the child. And then he brought it to man. That it means that Hashem was the Shushvina. Shushvina are the bride's maids or the groom.
So why did this whole section have to be repeated? I mean, I don't know.
It had to do with it's mentioned Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Elazar explaining the word diyu, and then we have diyu partsufim, and then we had the diyu of the fruits, and then this is how this came in. We'll have more things from Rabbi Yirmiyah. I'm sorry.
Back to what we made him, the same exact what we had it back. You said it was brachas. I mean, it's almost word for word, just quoting the whole thing. They're not like, just bringing that to, they're just going into the whole midrash of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Some scholars say that the way this was taught would be similar to the way a Maggid would come in and give a speech. He would say a story, and then he would teach a halacha, and it would be associated. Now, exactly how it got published, sometimes we have the stories separated from the halachas, and sometimes we actually have them together. So, whatever. Okay, that means that even a great person should make sheshvinin. It means they should help out for the wedding for a smaller person, and they should not feel bad about that. That's the way that they do it. Parts of it's a very good question. According to the opinion that said there were two faces, which one walked first? It makes sense that the male went first. The Tanya is because a person not supposed to walk behind a woman, even if it's his wife. What if he's on the bridge? What's he supposed to do? It's narrow, he can't go to the side. So you should go to the side, I guess, and let her continue past, and then should wait. I guess that's what it means. No, he should go ahead of her. He should go ahead of her, walking in the front. Anyone that walks behind the woman as she's going into the water, because she would have to lift up her clothing to go in, it loses his portion. I guess we'll have to stop.